Welcome, movie fans. Thanks for joining us for episode 95 of Reading Between the Reels, the premier podcast of cinematic adaptations of classic role-playing games. If you're a new listener, we're so glad you found us. And if you've been enjoying the show, please subscribe and tell someone about us. Post on X or Facebook, write a review in your favorite podcast catcher, especially iTunes, or just recommend the show to a friend. I'm Craig Dickinson, and I'm joined as always by my co-hosts, Corey Heitschmidt, Justin Nolan. What's up, fellas? How are we doing tonight?
I got you, Justin. Go ahead. I'll let you go first this time.
Oh, you will? Thanks, Corey. Hi, everybody.
Okay. I guess that's all we got. That's all we got.
I didn't have anything clever this time. Sorry.
Who picked this movie this week?
This is a Justin pick.
Pick. I figured. Oh, it felt like a Justin pick. I'll tell you
what
that.
What does that
right
mean?
Now. No, I'm just kidding. The last pick you had was very good. Weren't you the Count of Monte Cristo?
I was the Count of Monte Cristo.
I love that
I'm quite
movie.
proud of that one.
Yeah.
But this movie,
here
though,
we are this week.
In rewatching it, I'm just like, yeah, this is a good movie.
Why don't you introduce it there, Justin?
Okay,
tell us what we're watching.
We're doing Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Came out 2023, maybe? Is that right?
Yes, 2023. Yeah, in March 31st.
2023. It is a standalone fantasy action comedy that has a ragtag group of hardy heroes that band together to save the town, city, world. I don't know how far it's going to go.
Did you just describe Honor Amongst Thieves, or did you just describe Guardians of the Galaxy?
I just described like 50% of the movies ever made.
Okay.
So don't start this, Corey. Don't.
Oh, I'm starting there and I'm going there. The train has left the station.
Okay, so I am not a long-time Dungeons and Dragons player, but I guess a fairly recent convert within the last couple of years. Love Dungeons and Dragons. Like, it took over my life. I made it my entire personality. The game, not the movie. And as a Dungeons and Dragons player, I loved the movie, but I'm curious for you guys who have not played Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, Corey, have you played?
No,
it?
I actually just grew up on the cartoon when I was a kid. That's my experience to this. I used to watch the original cartoon.
There were some references in here for you then.
There was a fantastic reference in here. I saw it, and yes.
So I'm curious, not being steeped in the lore, how did you guys feel about this film?
I'll let Craig go first this time.
I really liked it. I thought it was silly, but like in the best way, very escapist. It's self-aware, like it knew what it was. I think, and I thought it was a great entry point. I know there's lots of Easter eggs. I'm just clear there's certain things where it's winking a nod, but those went way over my head. I have no prior. I've seen Stranger Things. That's really my exposure to Dungeons and Dragons. The Satanic Panic happened in the 80s. That's where I grew up. So that's bad.
Let's back that train up for a second. Hold on.
I don't want to go too far off the rails, Corey.
Was it called the Satanic Panic?
That was a thing where people were like Dungeons and Dragons is gonna
Yes, my mom was that way. I just had no idea that's what that was called. I love that that's the reference for what I grew up in.
Yeah. So that I missed that. That was my window and I missed it. So but yeah, so I think that this movie, at least for me, was, like I said, a great entry point where I knew there was obviously a bigger world that I wasn't privy to or didn't have prior knowledge of, but it was explained away or just referenced in a way that is like in Star Wars or whatever. There's referencing planets or other lands or what have you that I didn't need to know about. I knew enough. This movie was self-contained enough where I was able to understand what was happening. It's a pretty straightforward plot, even if you don't understand some of the cultures or references to places or past history events or whatnot. So I enjoyed it. It wasn't overwhelming. So kudos to the filmmakers on that.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to step in here, Justin. I actually like this movie. I think it's a great movie. I will tell you this. It's basically, if I summarize this movie, it's basically Star-Lord in the Dark Ages. That's what this is. You take 5 heroes from Guardians of the Galaxy and you have the exact same 5 heroes in Dungeons and Dragons, right? You've got the plucky leader who's a thief. You've got the overpowered female soldier with the sword who just who she could fight an army by herself and take everyone down, who's Gamora. You've got the shape-shifting Groot, who's can stretch themselves to whatever they need to do. And then you've got the wizard, who I would think of as Rocket, guy who pulls off magic miracles and makes everything work. And then the and don't get me wrong here, because the guy, I can't even say his name. He's the guy, the kind of straightforward guy.
Paladin?
Zank,
yeah.
Zank irony was lost on him. He is Drax.
He was very
absolute Drax. And they even made a reference to irony, and he didn't get it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is Guardians of the Galaxy. So if you like Guardians of the Galaxy, you're gonna like this movie. I love Guardians of the Galaxy. I think it's a great movie. I felt like this was a great movie too. I liked it. There's some good action scenes. There's the plot's good. It's kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy 1, similar in that plot. I feel like it's kind of a entertaining story. It's forgettable for those who are not big Dungeons and Dragons people who have this whole thing. You're going to watch it and be like, oh, that was a good, entertaining story. I'm going to walk away. I'm probably not going to watch this unless there was a sequel or something that comes out. Then I'll be like, okay, I got to watch it again. Because it has some good stuff in it. It has some wisdom that I liked. But it's just a good, plucky, epic, adventurous spirit show. So there you go.
Yeah, I don't think it is going to be remembered as pushing any cultural boundaries or anything like that.
Mm-mm.
But it did something that. So there have been several D&D movies. Only one that I know of made it to theaters about 20 years ago. It had Jeremy Irons in it, and it was trash, super bad. So I'm actually really surprised this one made it to theaters, knowing how fraught that property is in general. But at the same time, once it was in theaters, I'm actually surprised it didn't do better, because I feel like it could easily apply to so many people. You have the uber nerds that play Dungeons and Dragons and love the game that are going to go see it, and then anyone else could just go see it and have a good time. Like Craig said, it's going to make a bunch of references that maybe you don't understand, but aren't really important to the story. But I feel like it would have had such a hard time, and it did. Like I said, it didn't do super well in the box office, but it walks a super fine line where it has the built-in fan base that isn't going to crush box office numbers, but that built-in fan base will undoubtedly see it no matter what, but they're going to be hypercritical of it at the same time. So you have to appease that fan base, but at the same time, you have to appeal to a larger audience with a very niche property. And I feel like they did it for the most part.
So now I have a question about that, Justin, because I looked up why this movie didn't do as well, and it said that what's going on, hardcore fans were upset about a Hasbro OGL dispute.
Yeah, it came out at a really bad time, because we're going to get deep into this. Okay, I'm going to try and not make this super deep. What happened is, I'm also going to have, I'm sure some people correct me, because it's
something about original gaming license, right?
Yeah, so basically what happens is there was a company that owned Dungeons & Dragons for a long time, and it was later sold to Wizards of the Coast that owned Dungeons & Dragons, and Wizards of the Coast tried to monetize the game, basically said that if you've written any content for our game, we can shut you down or charge you for using our licensing. But it had never been that way since the game came out. So everyone was just making their own content, and the fun of the game Dungeons & Dragons is that everyone can participate, everyone can make their own content. You could write a book using Dungeons & Dragons lore and have people play within your fictional world, and it was yours, you owned it, you could monetize it. But they stepped that back, and
that's a money grab.
Yeah, it was a money grab, which I understand. You're a company, you got to make money, but it really ticked off the fan base. But it happened right as the movie was coming out, or right around that time, and I'm like, ooh, that's bad timing. But I can't imagine that would have hurt the larger audience, I think a bunch of ultra nerds. I say that with respect. That is a respectful term, as we are all ultra nerds here. But I think a bunch of ultra nerds got really mad.
Which I could see that happening, because this is one of those things where Dungeons and Dragons people who play this game are into this game. They are deep into this game. Like this is something they don't mess around with. And so I understand that. It's just tough because you watch a movie like this that you think, oh, it's a pretty good movie. I wouldn't put this as a fantastic movie, but it's a pretty good story. But I think it's terrible. It did as bad at the box office. It could have done better. But I looked at the Twitter feed for some of the trailers that originally came out, and there was just people, I'm not going to go see it. I'm mad about the OGL, all of this. So you kind of sabotage your own lore and your own property, because now that puts a movie like this, which would have had a great sequel. I mean, this could be a Guardians of the Galaxy type level movie, have a second one and possibly a third one with some great list of characters. These actors were all great. And now the studio's like, well, it's kind of on hiatus with all the things going on. Like, do we really want to sink this and have people not show up? So our fan base, we do this in Star Wars, we do this in Doctor Who, we do this, all these shows. We sabotage our own stories because of the hardcores who, that's not right, that's not comic accurate, and it can't be comic accurate, it can't be playable character accurate all the time. Sometimes what works on those pages does not work in a movie setting.
Well, and I don't know if that was one of the complaints, because D&D has Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to just say D&D from now on. D&D has like a pretty long and deep lore, but most of it is places and species and maybe some characters. But for the most part, you can play within this like sandbox of a world however you want. And there's not a whole lot you need to get right. I mean, there are some things, but it's not as like I would say strict as like a Star Wars lore or Lord of the Rings lore. But I think it would work perfect for some sort of cinematic universe like the MCU, because in the game Dungeons and Dragons, you have, I'm going to define a couple terms here. You have a DM. It's known as a dungeon master. He is the person, or he or she is the person running the game, essentially telling the story, moving the plot along. And then you have players, and your players are playing in the DM's game. You are progressing through the DM's story, and you're kind of like telling the story together, but ultimately the DM has final say over what happens. And I've played in several different campaigns. So me, Justin, I have played several different characters in this game. And I just think it would be hilarious if we had another Dungeons and Dragons movie where we have the same cast playing a separate group of characters, like completely different characters, not connected to these characters at all, because that happens in the actual game all the time. Like you're new characters all day long. So we could have Chris Pine as, a wizard or something, and they'll never say anything of it. It would just be like a nod and a wink. I just think that would be great. That needs to happen, but it won't. It would confuse people, but I would love it.
Good stuff. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump into cinematography. And so we're looking at composition, color, cam work. Was there anything, I'm going to start with you, Corey, anything that stood out to you cinematography wise that you want to bring up?
There were a few things I thought about. I thought the CGI through this movie was pretty decent, better than some of the Marvel stuff that came out. It feels very much like a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
But the CGI was, it was really good. It held up. I mean, it seems like CGI in movies right now is either very, very good or very, very bad. And a couple things that stood out. It's very dark, drab colors in the story throughout the whole thing. I mean, Dark Ages, right? So, this dragon tales and fairies and fantastical fantasy world. A lot of the clothing, everything, are nothing vibrant, but the flowers and the scenery and things behind you and the magic and the gems and the jewels, those are all vibrant colors. Those are all where you get the lights that are very bright. So I thought that was kind of pointed out. I will say, for camera work, I got to point out some of the architecture of everything that they filmed in is absolutely stunning. Stunning castles and camera work that they did. The one scene that I'm going to point out, Craig, I'm going to read into it. It's I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a part where they're in the hallway at some castle, and it's absolutely a beautiful castle. You guys can see it on my screen there.
Yeah, it's in Neverwinter's. This city.
Yes.
Or wait, no.
It's an actual
Baldur's
place.
Gate?
I looked it up. It really is, and it's this dual spired hallway. It's absolutely stunning, and the shot is so obvious. It's a thirds. You got one hallway that goes to the left, one hallway that goes to the right, and at the end of the hallways are two very different looks. If you Google this picture, you'll see it. The hallway that they're in is dark and smoky and wispy, so you don't know what's at the end of that hallway. But that's the path. That's the direction they're on. They're on the right side. And then you go down the left, there's some people walking, and there's a picture at the end, and it looks, like it's the end of the road or end of the hallway. And so I thought it was kind of an obvious way of saying, this is our path. Our heroes are going down this hallway, and it's a dark tale at the end, and we don't know what is going to happen. So it seemed to me, and they're on the right, not on the wrong or the left. They're on the right. So to me, I read into it. I don't know if I'm just overreading it, but making sense out of it. But I look at it and I think, wow, I kind of like this shot. It was a great use of thirds in it. It was a great use of two tunnels with an end. And one looks safe and clear where people are walking, and the other one looks dark and wispy and a little bit scary at the end.
Yeah, I was actually really happy with this movie with how... I'm disagree. I don't feel like the CGI was super great. Like it was fine, but it's not an MCU film, and I feel like MCU you expect a lot more out of. But the use of practical effects, like they used quite a bit, and they all looked pretty good. I feel like a lot of stuff was filmed on location. They did a lot of like epic landscape shots, and those landscape shots were for the most part real. We don't have any like Aquaman fake sunset scenes. So that was nice because the sun is really hard to come by. You want to make sure you CGI that one in. Freaking Aquaman. And it felt real, if as real as a fantasy movie should.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna push back first off on the dreary, like the dark and kind of muted color palette. Because I thought there was one great instance where they sort of contrasted that. Because at the beginning of the film, there's kind of this, they're using a blue lens and it's kind of cold and dreary. Because they're at Revel's End. Is it Revel's or Revel's End? The prison.
Planet
and then
Hoth.
as soon as they go into Edgin's backstory, it's immediately very bright and vibrant.
Yes.
So there's this contrast between those two things there, which I thought was brilliant.
I love how they do the backstories, because that's such... If you're playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons, when you introduce your character, you like get that little snippet of like, I'm going to give you my main backstory, and then I'm going to like trickle it to you for the rest of the campaign. And this movie totally does that. Yeah. This movie plays out like it's a DM playing with a bunch of players, and it's awesome. Anyway,
I like their
backstory.
Yeah, there's some great subversion at the beginning where you have the character's name is Gorg, that's coming in, the new prisoner, and there's this very dramatic, there's a stark landscape, and then it like slowly you see this sleigh approaching, coming right toward us, and then there's this bird's eye view looking down. Like this guy's going to be super important, right? And then he gets into the cell, and there's this great triangle setup where he's in the middle, which you would think he'd be the main character, and then you have Edgin on the left and Holga's on the right. And then Chris Pine just pipes up and says something snarky right there and just completely pulls you out of it. Which
is it the part where he said, "This is where a pea freezes in the bucket"?
Yeah, it's that scene.
Yeah, I love that.
Welcome
scene.
to the prison. Yeah,
it's hilarious. An orc, right?
It's an orc. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that was one of the things that I read that some fans were upset about, because orcs are a pretty big part in the game, and that is the only orc in the entire movie.
But that's what they're doing, though. They're making it look like this is something important. They walk him all the way through the prison, and they get him all the way up there, and like, no, you're a minor, tiny character in this story. You're not one of the main leads. So I loved that you had that triangle shot. There's a second triangle shot too when they go into Forge's office, where they're doing that same thing. Edgin's and Holga's on the right. So those are always kind of fun to see. Like who's the person that's in the focus of the scene is the person obviously in the middle. Some other things that I really liked, shaky cam is always a thing that's, if it's used correctly, it's awesome. If it's overused, it's kind of a pain. And I thought it was used brilliantly in this film. There's a couple of really good instances. The first one they have is in the flashback. Speaking of that, when Edgin's rushing back home when he finds his wife attacked by the Red Wizards, like they just kind of like over his shoulder, and he's frantic, and it just pulls you right in there, and you're feeling as stressed as he is. And then both times you see Holga taken out when she takes out the executioners and then the guards in the final act, and it's basically it's almost all full shots, so you can see the action, that's some highly choreographed stunt work, but it's herky jerky as well, so you're kind of feeling more immersed in the fight. So those couple of things I thought were brilliant, because most of the film is not. It's very steady cam, and then all of a sudden it's herky jerky, and it's for used sparingly. I think it's pretty brilliant.
Yeah, I thought the action scenes were done particularly well because, like you said, not a whole lot of shaky cam, but enough to make you feel like you're in that fight. And it felt like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be the resident nerd here.
Do it.
It felt like combat when you are playing a D&D game, because in a D&D game, it's usually like you and your party against a couple of other, bad guys, and sometimes you do really well, and sometimes, even though you may be super skilled at something, you roll the dice, and the dice gods just don't like you, and something just does not work out for you. Or you roll really well, and everything goes perfectly. Like that scene where Holga, she's talking to the guy about his axe, and she's like, all right, let's do it. Like, chop my head off.
Mm-hmm.
And she pulls the brick up to her neck, the axe hits the brick, and then she uses it to knock the guy out. Kind of one fluid motion. I'm like, man, if that was a Dungeons and Dragons game, she would have just rolled a 20. That would have been amazing. And then the whole time, Edgin, Chris Pine's character, he just keeps rolling really low numbers. He can't even get his little cuffs off.
Yeah.
He's spending that whole time just working against it. It's just it plays, or the movie just plays like a Dungeons and Dragons game, and it makes me happy.
I think Michelle Rodriguez, Holga, carries her choreography for fight choreography through the whole movie. I think she's the only one that really. Zenik has a good fight when they're down in that lair, but which was kind of cool. His little sword fight he had with those dead Thayan assassins. But Michelle Rodriguez really is the only big fight throughout the whole movie a couple times, and she does a great job. She's great for choreography. She's great for these roles. I wish her eyebrows moved more when she talked, because it's a little distracting for me. Because I think she's a great actress, but when she doesn't move her eyebrows, all I do is hear her from Fast and the Furious, and I'm just like, oh gosh, I can't take some of these lines. I live my life a quarter mile at a time.
I never felt like she was. I never liked her as an actress because she was always the same character, and I always hated that character. Yeah. Except for this film, she gives you some depth in this movie, and I'm like, oh. Okay, you're not being typecast. I mean, you're a little bit typecast, but you also have some emotional depth there with being in love with the halfling. That was hilarious.
It would have been her or Gina Carreri in this role to be able to pull this off. Yeah, or Gina Carano. Yeah, they would have. Either one of those two would have pulled this off. But I think Michelle Rodriguez did a great job.
Or what about Beth from Yellowstone? Right?
She's too small.
Sorry.
You're getting so far off track.
Whoever this is has to be
sound, which is what's next.
Craig.
We haven't got to performance yet. Sound. Let's talk about sound. Sound is good. Sound effects, music, vocal sounds. There's some narration in this, which is great. It's always fun. We talked about the backstories a little bit. I love the fact that there's a parallel. You have at the beginning, there's Edgin's, and then at the end it starts, and you kind of forget. At least I did. You have Forge he's kind of doing the epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
Explaining what happens, and then it's like, oh, it's back to it's his hearing. Okay, that's fantastic. I love how they circle back to that.
Okay, now here's your payoff, Craig. In the whole arc of the story was this symmetrical lines, and they even made a comment about Zenik making a comment about symmetrical sentence or something, and Chris Pine, Edgin says, just because a sentence is symmetrical, it doesn't make it not nonsense. And so he does these little lines, which makes your brain stop in the middle of the movie. Like, wait, I have to think about what you said. I need to sit down for this. And I can't, if the planner never fails to plan and never plans to fail. Like, oh my gosh, what the heck did you just say? Like, you literally have to write it down and read it to see it. Right. But there's a symmetrical point to those statements. And then the same thing, I felt like they did this in the movie. Symmetrical in the beginning was the story with Jonathan, who is apparently the way out of this place. And then
Jonathan!
the story again at the end with Jonathan and trying to get parole. So I thought it was a symmetrical way to wrap up the story and still have a payoff in the writing. So those writers did a good job for that.
Yeah.
No?
Okay. No, they're fine. I'm going to try and get us back on track talking about sound.
Stop it, Craig.
But that was my that was sound.
That's you're doing some performance stuff, which is great. We'll get there.
All right. I'm gonna pipe in here.
Yeah.
Probably ever since the 80s, but then again since Stranger Things and the title card.
Yeah.
I love making some good synth. It sounds great.
Absolutely.
And there were a couple scenes, especially in I can't pronounce it, but the lava underground place where the fat dragon is. There's some really good synth music there, especially when Zenk is explaining how the bridge works, and it goes into like that deep dark synth sound. Ooh, oh man, it gives me goosebumps. I love it. Makes me happy.
The opening song after Chris Pine's backstory, where he gets away. That is a great song. I thought it was fantastic.
Title. Yeah, we got
the
some
main
light
title
motif.
fit really well with the story where it was going. I thought it was a humorous backstory leads into an epic title and song sequence. I think that's a great cover. So
yeah, so main title is it's got bagpipes in it. That's the one we're looking at. The strings, the driving drums, it's got the bagpipes, and there's a chorus that sings as well. So yeah, you got over the main titles. You got it happens again when they reunite with Simon. When they recommit to the quest after Edgin confesses that he lied about Simon being able to use the helm and the way he stole the red wizard treasure. You have it when they turn the boat back around at the end, and during the Simon versus Sofina fight. Then Dork does like a Hulk versus Loki thing on Sofina. So it's played half dozen times at least. It's absolutely, it's a main title. And that's like the Star Wars main title is used throughout as like, this is absolutely our theme song, and it's rousing and epic. And Lorne Balfe did the score on this, who's done a lot of great stuff. He's the guy that did the Lego Batman movie, it's a far better score than that movie deserves, but it's a great score than the last couple of Mission Impossible movies. He did Black Widow, Black Adam, so he's done some superhero stuff. But I think the score for this film is absolutely one of its high points.
Really?
I do. I think it's really good.
There's a part don't know if you guys caught this, but there's a part in the lair where they're running up the stack of bones, the big pile of bones. And you see the bones. I realized they're made out of rubber because they stepped on one bones and it like kind of was all foamy looking. But the sound was very clinky like bones would be. And so whoever was doing the sound at that point did a really good job of making bone sounds. But I looked at it and I thought, what in the world? Those don't even look like they're just a little too fake.
You don't know, Corey. Maybe they're the bones of a species that has rubbery bones.
Maybe they didn't get enough calcium in their diet. That's why they're in a lair. I get that.
Yeah.
But anyway, it made you realize how much people are making all the sound effects that take place in a movie. Everything. I mean, the bones clicking to the leather they're walking in and everything.
Yeah. So Justin, you didn't like the score on this film, or you just thought it was okay?
No. We talk about this every week. I don't notice the score as much as I should, and I even try. I notice that it makes me feel the feelings, but in the moment, I have a hard time like pointing it out unless I'm watching something like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, or Lord of the Rings. Like other than that, it's just
John Williams or Howard Shore.
Stuff.
Yeah.
How many times you have to watch it to do that? Because I can't do that, Craig.
Just
every time
the once. You just if you hear something that sounds familiar. I mean, I've been practicing for a while, so
I guess so. You have a chameleon brain.
Needs to be just get the Soundhound out on your phone and do it. Yeah,
I've probably seen this movie 7 times now.
Yeah,
I have a Dungeons and Dragons club at school, and I just watched it with my club, like as a final farewell thing. And I didn't get it.
Well, like that synth you mentioned, the synth thing. There's a track called "Into the Castle," which it almost goes like a techno dance track. It's when Dork escapes the castle, and then when they go back in, and that's the main one. I was like, it's a great track, and it pulls me out a little bit because it is, it's electronic more than like traditional symphonic score. But then again, like I really, and at some point we'll do it. Lady Hawk, which is a medieval story, right around the same time period. It's like all synth. Like there's no orchestra at all. It's a very unique soundtrack. So that doesn't bug me at all. But the one thing I really liked about the music in this is all the diegetic music. Chris Pine, his job is he's a bard. And so he's singing a lot. And, there's a song called Juice of the Vine and Lasses and Lads and stuff. And he's good. He's a good singer. But whenever I hear it, I just immediately go, Spidey Bells. Because I love that so much. And it's like, he's good, but it's also kind of tongue in cheek at the same time. And it's like, this guy should sing more in movies.
Did he sing? Did he sing when he was walking in with that little harp thing or lyre thing? And those guards came walking up to him and he was the hologram. Was that really him singing? Because it didn't sound like him.
No, that's totally him.
Are you kidding me? When I was watching it, I kept thinking, are they dubbing someone else in? Because that doesn't sound like Chris Pine at all.
He does the Spidey Bells song at the end of Into the Spider-Verse.
Does he really?
That's him. Yeah.
Oh, man, he's a good singer, but I did not know that here. I thought it wasn't him singing. I thought he was dubbed over somebody.
Yeah, it's a lute actually too.
Did anyone else not know that Chris Pine was so funny? I think
he's fantastic.
Oh yeah, I think he's funny even in like Star Trek 09.
Yes.
I mean, he's
trying to get on the ship.
Star Treks. He's fantastic.
I feel like every movie he's in though, he's kind of a jerk, and this one he was way more.
Oh,
I mean, he's a bard. And typically in the game, bards are very charismatic, but he never said anything funny, but he delivered everything in a funny way.
It's his timing.
Yeah, he did great.
Yeah. Well, awesome. He's not a jerk in Wonder Woman.
No, he's good in that.
Steve Trevor. Either one of those movies is not a jerk. So
he was fantastic in Horrible Bosses too. That's where you see he's got some comedy to him.
That's true too.
He was so good at that. And I think his Star Treks are great.
Oh, no, he's great. I just never remember him as funny.
I think of him as a fantastic action movie. He did that movie, This Means War, and that was a great movie that he did.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, Corey.
You didn't like that movie?
Your bar for great movies is different than mine.
No, my bar bounces around. I do not have a bar that's stuck in one place. I adapt. Thank you very much. Like some of you, I think
you're in the
write
moment.
It off.
That's fine. This is the one with Reese Witherspoon and Tom Hardy.
And right? Venom, yes. Tom, what's his name? Tom Hardy. Yeah, like
I would have called
those
that a
two
fun
in there
movie.
were incredible.
It's okay.
Oh, that was a fantastic movie.
It's a fun movie.
I love Reese Witherspoon too.
I can watch it once and be done. Okay, let's talk. We're already kind of talking about performance anyway. Yes, I think the performances are across the board pretty great in this. Let's talk about dialogue though, because I think there are some really funny things. And some kind of wisdomous things as well.
Why wouldn't we have a fat dragon in this movie? Like this is the best dragon I've ever seen make an appearance in any movie.
This is funnier than Guardians of the Galaxy. It is. Like I know we're going to compare this a lot to Guardians, but it's far funnier.
That's
no.
Yeah, I mean, it's
going to fight me on that.
Equal.
And you really do see kind of like the Star-Lord Edgin comparisons, like right off the bat, like when he's doing his. And it's not what he says, it's the way he says it. When he's doing his backstory and he just says, I'm sorry, it's just so hard to relive this without Jonathan here.
Jonathan.
It's like he actually like he's emotional, but he's like, I just need that guy here so I can jump out the window with him.
Are you sure we shouldn't wait? No, like that entire scene though, where they're reviving the corpses and they're getting a little bits and pieces of the battle. That is so
That's
hilarious.
A brilliant scene. Yeah.
And I even that was heavily featured in the trailers and it was still hilarious every time I watch it.
That was the highlight of when this movie came out. That was all over TikTok. I'm going to tell you right now that was the whole premise of the whole thing. I don't even think there's any other scenes from this movie that are on TikTok except for that.
Like that plays so much like a Dungeons and Dragons game with like an annoyed DM because the players aren't following the story the DM wants them to follow. So the DM is just like, well, you can only ask him 3 questions. And I love it. I love it so much.
That one guy, I think the rumor is that one guy's still out on the battlefield waiting for his 5th question.
Well,
yeah. Or 5 questions.
That poor bugger.
So any other lines that we haven't talked about yet?
Yes.
You want to quote?
Just a little banter between Michelle Rodriguez and Chris Pine where he says, Olga? What's wrong with my lips? And she says, they're too big for your face. Like I feel like that's a great line, and it might be like a little bit of a joke of something that I don't know that Chris Pine has to endure or something as an actor, but it was pretty good.
Anything that Zank says
Yes.
and Chris Pine is around is pretty funny. Irony is a blade that cuts he who wields it most especially. It's like, you're not very fun, are you? Like,
That's a great line.
I do not traffic in colloquialisms. Like, I love this guy.
Mm-hmm. See, I think like Drax literally is quite literal and doesn't get it. I think Zank gets it. He's just above it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well,
he understands irony. He just doesn't care.
I'm gonna be this guy again. So you have your main characters, right? We have like Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Justice Smith. Like you have the main characters. Zank plays very much like an NPC where the DM is playing the NPC.
Yes.
And because the DM is playing so many of the side characters, you don't have time to fully develop them, so you just kind of like you hit that same note over and over and over again.
I'm thinking about the walking straight thing right now.
The walking straight thing, like to me, that is like that is to me that is the DM zoned out and just said, okay, the character is just going to go in a straight line, even if it's over a rock. And yeah, he plays perfectly like a NPC where he's lawful good, and he will only be lawful good all the time, and he is no fun. But he is good at what he does. But he's so good that he can't stay with the party, otherwise the movie won't happen. You know,
he's overpowered. Yeah.
Oh,
so
that's great.
And the fact that Chris Pine narrates that as he does that, so I feel like that's just a nod to players, is what they're doing, right? Is that what they're doing here for the game?
So much of this movie is a nod to like when you play Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of people think it's a bunch of nerds sitting around a table with wearing cloaks and suits of armor, which it can be, but it is much funnier than you'd expect because you're just sitting around a table with a bunch of your friends talking about nerd stuff. And this movie plays to that effect very, very well. It is funny like the game would be, because you would have those snide little remarks all the time, and you'd be making fun of the DM's NPC because he's one-dimensional and overpowered. And sometimes the DM's NPC is going to get you out of a bind that you could not get out of yourself. And sometimes the DM's NPC might over-explain things, like the bridge scene where he has to over-explain what's happening with the bridge. And then the player characters decide, I don't want to do this stupid bridge. I'm going to find a way around it. And then the DM's like, dang it, I put a lot of work into that.
Yeah.
You wrecked it.
Big old
and
long
you
speech.
You see that on his face, on Zenk's face, like, I just gave that whole speech and you wrecked my bridge. It's so good.
Another line I liked was after the big hawk girl. What was her name? Sophia Lillis Doric.
Jonathan.
Jonathan is great, but where she basically goes Hulk, puny god on the Red Witch and smashes her to pieces and then throws her into a wall. And they say, "I think you got her." And it was very much like a Hulk, smashing Loki moment, but puny god, and then I think you got her. Same thing.
Can I compare this to the game again? Sorry, I'm just my shtick. So a common thing that DMs will do is if your player character defeats the big boss, oftentimes if you get the final blow, they'll say, all right, you describe how you want this to go. Because normally the DM would describe it, but I've had several DMs that say, okay, tell me how you want this to go. And they'll explain how they did this final blow, and they'll usually make it very epic. To me, that's what that seemed like, is the player character was like, and this is what I do. I'd smash them against the ground and over and over and over again, and then I'd throw them across the city, and they'd hit the wall and then die. Like that. Oh, so good.
All right, here's my last one. Speaking of Doric, she meets Edgin and says, "What exactly that you bring? What is it exactly you bring to this?" And he says, "Me, I'm a planner. I make plans. You've already made the plan. So what value do you have now? If the plan fails, the existing plan, I make a new plan. So you make plans that fail? No." And then Holga pops up. He also plays the lute. Holga, not relevant. And
it was a whole great series.
Oh my gosh, it's just he's just a talker. That's what he is.
It's hilarious, witty banter.
And again, it's not what he says; it's the way he presents it.
Yeah. Yep. And in the game, bards, nobody likes bards. They're very frustrating to have in your party. Very useful because they're full of charisma and you can get through sticky stuff, but also like shut up. And that's kind of what everyone felt whenever you talk.
All right. Now, I always have to find a little wise quote, and I'm going to throw this one out because I thought it was a wisdomous quote of the movie. Was Chris Pine when he's trying to talk to him around the campfire, and he says, "We must never stop failing because the minute we do, we failed." And at first, it's that symmetrical joke line that they've been doing throughout the movie, with some of these symmetry things. But it makes sense. It's a very wise quote. You have to keep failing. You have to keep trying, because as long as you're trying, you haven't failed. You're just failing until you succeed, which very wise. We could use that in our lives, I think, and we could all apply that where keep trying, keep going, keep pushing, don't give up. So that was good.
Solid. I also want to point out, really, it's Chris Pine's the one I've spent the most time watching because he's just that charismatic. But I noticed he's almost always squinting in this movie. Yeah. He's either pretending to be confused, which he often is doing, or he's just frustrated with Holga. But he has that squint on his face like almost all the time. And I love the fact that they call out like his gray stubble. And there's a great line. I'm going to cheat and throw in another line. What Hugh Grant says, "It's scoundrelly but professorial. You look like a well-read fisherman with secrets."
Yes.
So good.
Did anybody catch the line where they're walking through with Zenk and Chris Pine says, "I don't trust this guy," and then Michelle Holga or whoever says, "Even though he's helping us." It was exactly the same situation as Khan in The Wrath of Khan, where he says, "As soon as we get to the bridge, I want you to drop him." But I thought he was helping us, and he goes, "I'm pretty sure we're helping him." It was I expected him to say that at the end of this line. "I'm pretty sure we're helping him."
I assure you, the only thing up my sleeve is my arm.
It was the exact same scenario, and
you keep hearing him as it whispers. Yeah,
it was good. It was good. It was almost the exact same thing, though. That's where he could have thrown it in.
His Zank's delivery of the line, "I will not be complicit in the illicit use of ill-gotten booty." I like that too.
So I will not be complicit.
We did talk about the what were we going to say? The practical effects, and I do want to point that out too. Legacy Effects Studio is the one that did tons and tons of creatures, which I love because it's an absolute 1980s vibe. Like from the beginning, you have butcher the name, I think, Norixius, the Dragonborn council member guy. It's so just ridiculous, over the top. Like he's talking just normal, regular human expressions, but with a dragon head.
But it looks good.
It looks fantastic. It does,
because every time you see CGI, your brain immediately judges that CGI on a scale.
Yes.
Yep.
And I feel like with practical effects, you don't do that as much, and it's lovely.
I do. I love it so very much. It reminds me a little bit of with some of the stuff they did in Solo, which I know gets a bum rap from a lot of people, but that felt to me a lot like with the White Worm and stuff at the beginning. Felt there, and it's Ron Howard who had done Willow with a lot of practical effects. Like it felt like, hey, this is an 80s fantasy movie, and I can't go wrong if you're going to touch those things at all. And I know I read some things that the filmmakers had said there's going to be a lot of CGI in this just because there has to be. But whenever we can kind of ground it in reality and we can do it in a practical way, do it in camera, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they nailed it. You know what? You mentioned Willow. I could draw a lot of parallels to this and Willow. Willow is funny. It's fantasy, but it's also got a lot of heart too. Mm-hmm. It had a little bit of a Willow vibe to it. It's like Willow meets Star-Lord.
Yeah.
Willow meets Star-Lord meets Lord of the Rings, kind of. Yeah.
It's family friendly. I love that too. Like there's obviously there's ways they could have gone and made it more risque, and they chose not to do that. It just feels like they really hit the sweet spot with this, and it is kind of a bummer that it didn't make more money, that it wasn't more successful.
I'm gonna highlight that because I love when Hollywood does this. Because you know why? Justin just pointed out, and if there were Hollywood people that listen to us, this is something they need to point out, that when you make a movie like this, it is so powerful for the sake that Justin has this Dungeons and Dragons group, which is, a select group in a middle school. And this is a show you're able to watch with them and not worry about too much innuendo, too much cussing, too much blood and gore. Yep. But it's a movie that you're able to sit as a leader in a school with kids and say, hey, this is a great movie, this great story for this story, this character that we all love. And if, we love to play these games and have that. That's great versus getting something that's too gory, too scary, too much innuendo or too much cussing. And then great, now I can't show it to kids and, and have this moment, this memory that we could do.
Well, and it was great. It's always great watching with the club. This is the second year we've done it. It came out last year, right around the time we were ending the club. But there are some kids in that club that they show up and they never play Dungeons and Dragons. They're there for their friends, and they watched this movie and enjoyed it. They were laughing and giggling, and then there were kids that play the game like hardcore nerds. Again, good term. That they were high-fiving each other during this movie because it reminded them of their game that they had played with each other. I mean, it appeals to both audiences, players and not players. And it, like you said, it's wholesome. It has a good message. At the end, like you feel happy feelings in your body when he decides to revive Holga instead of his wife. He realizes Holga is my closest thing to my daughter's mother. Like, she doesn't remember her actual mother. This is for her, not for me. That's good. You're putting your child first. That's a good happy feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. Found family thing. I wanted to also just kind of what we talked about earlier with the real world stuff versus CGI with locations too. And Justin, you mentioned this too. Like, there's a lot of stuff they filmed it in Iceland and in Northern Ireland, and which again keeps the story grounded. There's real castles that they're out in front of and whatnot, except for the Underdark when they go into there, which is a lot of CGI, obviously, but it's supposed to be weird. And I love the fact that you have this very clear juxtaposition between those two things. Like, it's the underworld, it's supernatural, it's gonna be weird, but I'm not pulled out of the story because I know it's a different reality versus up top. Or if it was all CGI, then it would kind of, I don't know, I think it would weaken it a little bit. So I thought that was a great balance as well.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with the arena too. I mean, that's going to be bizarre, and that's just the way you're going to have to do that. So
that arena too was so fun because again, that had several Easter eggs in there, but the arena itself was set up like a Dungeons and Dragons battle, because in that game you have little squares that you have to move around and you can only attack and move so far, and total callback to that, but it still worked in the story itself, like, it's
and not a cheesy
except for
way.
I don't know how the audience saw anything in that arena if they're all behind giant blocks. How are people in the stands watching?
I did think that
took me out a little bit.
Yeah, there's a part where they first appear, and from his angle, it's a downward shot looking back over Chris Pine's head, and you can barely see part of the audience. And I thought, they're not watching anything.
Yeah, this isn't a very good show for them.
But I think some of the locations they said are absolutely spectacular. This film's like a William Wallace type movie. I mean, it is Braveheart and country, and it's out in Iceland, Ireland, Scotland. I see they got Northern Ireland here. Some of these castles are spectacular. So the scenery just makes this movie amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it feels big, and that's the other thing that I keep coming back to. Is like, I mean, even though I'd not played the game, I know it's part of a larger world, and I think this movie really conveys that really well. That we're just getting a snippet of what's happening in this universe, but it feels big because that's the thing you just can't do like they do like Disney Plus shows on the volume or whatnot. It just never quite feels as big as it does when they're outdoors, and you get those really big sweeping shots, and they're walking long distances, a la Lord of the Rings, or even Willow did some of that, to go back to that too. But it just feels more epic. Just and it doesn't take that long to show that shot. It's a couple of seconds of film, but it just adds to the
that's
epic nature of the film.
All that Gothic architecture. I mean, that just is something else.
And I feel like it does a good job of it. You could easily make this into a cinematic universe, but it doesn't feel like they're gunning for that so much at the expense of their own story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's self-contained too.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I did want to talk about just briefly under set decoration, just when they meet Marleman, that you have some oversized furniture. So you're doing practical effects to make him look like he's smaller. And I have to say, when that door was about to open, I watched this with my kids and they'll testify this. I'm like, please be somebody famous. Please be somebody famous. Please be somebody famous. Please be. And then it was Bradley famous. It's Bradley Cooper. I was so happy. I was like, it's got to be a cameo. I love this stuff. Please. Yes. And it was. I was so excited.
Can you guys explain something to me?
Yeah.
Like
yes.
The scene was funny. I get it's funny. You're subverting expectation. Bradley Cooper short. Haha. Why is it that funny? Like what? Why is it funny that it's Bradley Cooper? I don't get. Every time you watch a review of this movie, everyone points to that. It's like, oh, it's the funniest part of the movie.
He's a huge friggin' star. It's subversion of expectations for me, and like it doesn't work as well on subsequent viewings. The first time, I'm still just like, you paid off because like I said, I was waiting for it to be somebody huge. It needed to be, and then it was. It's a little bit of key jangling thing. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a game. You played the game, but it's not overly funny in and of itself. It's funny because
I think it's funny in and of itself because the Michelle Rodriguez is so huge and so. I mean, she's absolutely buff in this movie. She plays this invincible soldier.
Yeah, she's got the scars and the brains and stuff.
She's in love with these small people because later she gives an award or she at the end with the other guy who is from the same place. She bites her lip and it was kind
makes
of
eyes at him.
Makes eyes at him. And it was very much a nod to I like your people. So I mean it was I don't know. I thought it was just kind of a nod of irony that here she's this big tough soldier and she loves little small people that she can overpower.
And potatoes. Are the potatoes significant?
Justin, what's with potatoes in Dungeons and Dragons?
That's just a quirk.
I haven't played Dungeons and Dragons incredibly long, but I don't know any significance of potatoes in that game.
Potatoes. Little Lord of the Rings reference.
All right. We're gonna move down to characters, and I do have to say, so Corey, you had your guy from the Gray Man, and I figured out how to say his name. Reggae Jean Page.
What?
As Zank. Yeah.
I
looked it up. Yeah. He's back in there.
Oh, yeah, he was. Yes. I love him in The Gray Man. I think he's fantastic. I think Zank is a great character.
I like him as Zank a whole lot better.
The nod that I'm going to throw for characters was the cartoon characters. And this is pretty much the only thing. Justin's catching all these details. I
don't know any about this, so preach on. Tell me about it.
And so if you Google this, Dungeons and Dragons cartoon characters in the movie.
Okay.
You'll see there's a cameo shot of the crew on set and the characters that were in there. Their costumes are identical to the cartoon that I grew up with. And they're the ones in the maze that end up on the cage. They're in the cage.
Oh, okay.
And the moment they're in that cage, like when the maze starts popping up and they sew them over on the side, everybody looks over and there's a whole nother group of people over on the side. It was them. It was these 6 people from the cartoon.
Okay. Yeah, because they did pause and make a point of that. So that makes sense.
And they look very out of place, like their costume.
Absolutely. And their costumes are so bad. This is my point. In the cartoon, it was a great set of costumes and a great story in the 80s. But when you make this on the side and you look at this set photo on the internet of them smiling and taking a picture, it looks like just cosplay gone wild here. It is so bad. It doesn't work. And in the movie, they have them in the cage and they have them there and you can see these characters. And if you were a fan of the cartoon, like I was growing up, you were like, oh my gosh, there's all my people right there. That's the only one missing was the Dungeon Master. It was fantastic. So I thought it was a nice nod. It was a fan little tip of the hat to me.
Yeah.
Not to
the
Justin,
attention to detail, just in general, like every single spell they do, every single one is a spell from the game. Like
the writers love this game, so then they're doing that. They're holding justice to it.
They brought in some people that knew what they were doing to make sure it was on point. So it's fun. It's fun watching with your friends and going, oh hey, I know that. That's Mage Hand or whatever it may be. Like you can point all that stuff out. It's a good time.
I just have to show you that picture though. Like this is the picture of the cast that was in it right here.
And where would we go to find that since this is not a video podcast?
I know this is not a video. You would just Google Dungeons and Dragons cartoon cameo.
Those are some cheap looking costumes.
And they're so cheap. They're so terrible. But in the cartoon, they were great costumes. His bow shot like electric arrows and stuff. And that's what I grew up with. Nice. So the moment I saw them, I recognized them. So that's the only Easter egg that I caught in the whole movie. Because like Craig, I grew up in the Satanic Panic era where I was allowed to watch the cartoon, but no, I could not play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I couldn't even watch the cartoon.
I had when my club was getting out one day, I had a janitor stop me, and he's like, "Oh, what are you guys doing in there?" I'm like, "Oh, playing Dungeons and Dragons." He's like, "Oh, that's a bunch of Satan worshiping cultists, isn't it?" I'm just like, "Oh, you dear sweet man." Like he was an older guy, so I'm sure he came from that era.
Yeah.
But no, nothing satanic. Like, you're not casting spells in real life. You're not drawing, like, you're not doing blood rituals or anything in there.
Nope.
Just a game.
So last few things we have on the agenda, the hero's journey. I don't think it's not really a hero's journey. I think it's just more of a kind of a collective redemption story for everybody, for the entire group of thieves. That's kind of the way I look at it. And, you know, in fact, with the found family thing, which I thought was great too, that that Edgin recognizes that Holgan. I love the way you said that. Like, she's the one who's been the mother to his daughter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and I appreciate that there wasn't any romantic interest there. Because I feel like in a lot of movies, and I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, like things get pushed into movies, I think, more often than they should sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not trying to make this political. And this movie, I don't feel like did that at all. And I appreciate that. It was just a fun movie that's not pushing any agendas on either side.
No,
other than just telling a good story.
Yeah.
Oh, that's refreshing.
I mean, I'm looking at world building would be next, and I think we've kind of just talked about this repeatedly with all the Easter eggs that are there if you want them, and then if you're not, it's not. It strikes a really good balance because, like I said, it's interesting to have like different levels here. Where Justin, you know us significantly more than both of us. Corey, you know a little bit more than I do. I know nothing, and we all enjoyed it at whatever level we came to the film. So that's hard to do.
Yeah. Like I said at the top, like they walked a really thin line of we can't piss off our current fan base, but we also have to bring in new people.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I think they do a good job nodding to three groups. The one, Justin's fan base who plays the games. 1, 2, my fan base that watched the cartoon, haven't done anything with it since, and now are jumping in here just to get a little tip of the hat. And then 3, to bring in just a great fun story that's a quest, battles, and magic replacing science kind of fantasy land. So,
So any other final thoughts before we get out of here? On final thoughts on Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Jonathan.
Wait for Jonathan to get here. He's supposed to be here.
No, I don't think I have any final thoughts. I think we all just really loved this movie. 2 in a row, man. Monte Cristo and now this one.
Yeah, nice
job. All
Justin.
these movies.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie. It's fun. It's a rich movie. It's got a lot of fantasy. I like it. Wouldn't say it.
Yeah, it doesn't push anything. It's not amazing. It's not going to go down in any record breaking history books or anything. But
Corey's bar is jumping all over the place about what's a great movie or not.
Listen.
It's no. This means
don't
war.
try and don't try and nail me on the wall because I'm telling you, you will not be able to do it. I just can't.
Or you're like a Rubik's Cube in pants.
I am a Rubik's Cube in pants. You don't once you get in my head, you don't want to get out. It's just
an enigma, a mystery wrapped in a riddle.
It is.
All right, I'm going to wrap up. So as we close, we just want to say thank you, everybody, so much for listening. If you want to connect with us, you can find us on X and Facebook. You can email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com. You can leave us a voicemail through the SpeakPipe app on our website. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, tell a friend, support us by writing a review on your favorite podcast catcher, especially iTunes. We love those reviews. They help so much with people finding the show. And as decided by our amazing listeners, our next episode will be a review of Michael Bay's Armageddon.
Yes.
That's right. Send us an email or voicemail.
Sorry.
That's fine. Send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from Armageddon, and we'll share it on the next episode.